Hello, Upstars community. I am Matias Battolla, and welcome to this fireside chat on how marketers should adapt to IDFA changes. For those who are not familiar with this, Apple has introduced ATT, or App Tracking Transparency, which basically means iOS apps will need to get consent from users in order to store and use their IDFA. This is a major change in the industry, since IDFAs were there from the beginning and were used for retargeting, attribution, and other kind of strategies. As I told you before, I am Matias Battolla, Managing Director at Rocket Lab, and I'm pleased to introduce our special guest, Ryan Goeden. Ryan is the VP of Sales of Kochava. Hello, Ryan. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks a lot, Matias. I'm doing all right. It's a lockdown in London, but all good. How are you doing?
Yeah, same thing here. I mean, it's crazy not being able to go to a bar at night and grab a beer, but yeah, crazy times we're living in. So yeah, anyway, that's just what it is. Ryan, we're curious to hear about your experience. How did you start your mobile experience? Where was the beginning of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little background on myself. So I've been working in marketing for mobile apps for about 7-8 years now, and mostly in London. I got my start working for a big mobile ad network that maybe some of your community knows about. They're called InMobi, big global ad network. If you're doing mobile marketing campaigns, there's a good chance you probably heard of them. I got my start with them about 7-8 years ago now, and really focusing on the attribution side of things. So everything related to campaign measurement. And I've been kind of in that industry ever since. Worked for a startup, did some freelance work for a little while, but I joined the team at Kochava about a year and a half ago now.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really great experience that you have, like combining both working on that network and MMP. It's like amazing that contrast, and it gives you like a really good perspective. So thanks for sharing your experience. So let's go to the point, like what does Kochava do for people who are not familiar with it?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So we're one of the main mobile measurement partners, or MMPs. You'll often hear that term thrown around. And what we do first and foremost is we measure the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns. We got our start in mobile, so helping with mobile app install campaigns. So taking the installs that a marketer is getting and attributing them back to the paid media channels or owned media channels that they're running campaigns on. Now, over the years, we've become more than just a mobile app install tracker. We're now fully omni-channel, so we do things on web, connected TVs, PC and console as well. And we've also moved into some other kind of related industries as well. We also have a big data marketplace business where we help our advertisers really gain insights on who their users are. And we've also started moving into more publisher side products because, especially as all these changes are happening on iOS, a lot of publishers are realizing that they need to kind of think about measuring the campaigns that are run on their inventory as well. So we're focusing on some products for them too. So yeah, we've kind of evolved over the years, but our core platform is still very much a mobile measurement partner for mobile first companies, but with adding in some of these other elements as well.
Great.
Yeah. Sure. I was like always fascinated about how MMPs were able to adapt and go from mobile to kind of a more omni-channel view. So yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing all this. So Ryan, how do you think user acquisition campaigns might be impacted by post-IDFA changes? I know this is like our main topic, so I want to go straight to it.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what's on everybody's mind right now. I think maybe before I comment on that, let me just take a step back about 6 months ago when Apple announced these changes and just kind of go through what is the ATT framework, what are some of these other terms you're hearing about, like SK Ad Network. Just cover that a little bit, and then I'll comment a little bit on what does this mean for mobile marketers. So yeah, rewind the clock back to fall 2020. And Apple announced this thing called the App Tracking Transparency Framework, or ATT for short. And what that was is a new requirement that every app developer has to do, where they have to ask their users for permission to collect data on them and then share that with other companies. So that's now a new requirement. It used to be that app developers could more or less do this on their own without getting permission. But if you had an iOS device, you could go into the user settings and select this limit ad tracking thing that would essentially prevent that from happening. But the reality is very few people did that. So for the most part, if you were an app developer on iOS, you were able to track user behavior and then send that data to other third parties. So that's now going away. And what this means for app install campaigns, which really rely on this ability, is that that's going to change. You mentioned the term IDFA. This is a unique way, a device ID, an identifier that every iOS device has. And it's what mobile marketers use to take their app installs and relate those back to their media channels. And essentially, if a user doesn't give permission through this ATT framework, that IDFA goes away. So now mobile marketers, they have no way to relate their app installs back to their marketing campaigns the way they used to do. And so things like really having precise, we would say deterministic attribution for their mobile marketing campaigns isn't possible anymore. Now, with that, Apple has released a framework as well called the SK Ad Network framework, or StoreKit Ad Network, I think is what it stands for. For this, we'll just call it kind of SK Ad Network. And this is a way for mobile marketers to still be able to relate their app installs back to their paid media channels in a deterministic way. But it comes with some changes, if you will. So SK Ad Work, like I said, it still allows you to do this. It also allows you to relate in-app events. So maybe you want to kind of track not just installs, but something like an in-app purchase or something like that. You can still take these and relate these back to your paid marketing campaigns. But the key is that you won't be able to identify those users or single them out. All of this happens through Apple in an anonymized fashion. So you'll be able to see kind of reporting from your ad network or your publisher that you're working with on how many installs came from a campaign you're doing. But you're not going to be able to say segment these users and then track them in the long run. You're not going to be able to track long-term LTV metrics and relate this back to the campaign because that user level tracking that you used to have is going to go away. And then similarly as well, a lot of the reporting on this used to happen through an MMP. Now, if you're not kind of collaborating with your media partners, this data coming from SK Ad Network is now going to go to the publisher, and then they're going to have to report it back to you. So yeah, these are kind of some of the changes here. Deterministic tracking is still possible, but you're not going to be able to segment out users, and you're going to have to kind of rely on your publishers to be able to provide these insights back to you.
Great. Yeah, amazing. Super insightful. Thank you very much for sharing all that. Regarding the challenges, I agree with you. I think not being able to see the long-term lifetime value metrics for user acquisition managers or for marketing managers would be one of the biggest challenges. On top of that, you will have to think different strategies probably for Android and for iOS. They will be fundamentally different, in my opinion. So I was wondering if you can share your insights on maybe how marketing teams should adapt to this new kind of reality, thinking about like how marketers should have iOS campaigns and Android campaigns as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that we're talking with our customers quite closely about. And, as soon as this was announced by Apple, us at Kochava, we started tailoring and changing our platform in order to take full advantage of this new SK Ad Network framework. So yeah, I could kind of maybe share some thoughts that we have, some of the things that we're seeing our customers do in the short term and kind of our general guidance for this. And then as well, I think maybe some kind of medium-term considerations, especially for iOS here. So in the short term, I think the big sort of thing everybody needs to realize is that the way campaign tracking happens on iOS for the last 10 years has fundamentally changed. And so everything that you've done before, you're going to kind of have to throw it out the window and start working in this new way. So I just say that to kind of emphasize the importance and the significance of these changes here. So one of the things that we recommend everybody do is start talking with your media partners right now. Because I think you'll realize is that some ad tech vendors, some publishers, and some advertisers, like they know what's going on. They've been researching this, but there's still a lot that are still figuring it out. And so it's really important for you as the advertiser to be having these conversations now to try to understand what of your media partners are prepared for these changes. Because the thing is that with this SK Ad Network framework, it's not just you as the advertiser that has to take advantage of it. It's also the publishers and the media partners that need to do this as well. They need to integrate with that. And if they're not, then you're not going to be able to track campaigns on them. So anyway, we suggest really start talking to your partners right now so that you can start kind of figuring out which ones are going to be ready for this. The other thing that we highly recommend people start thinking about as soon as possible is how to instrument the SK Ad Network framework in their app. And that means not just tracking the installs themselves, although there will be some kind of code changes you have to make for that. But the other thing is to start thinking about how to track in-app events, or we kind of call them sort of in-app conversions as well. So there's a key part of this SK Ad Network framework, and it's called the conversion value. And it's essentially a bit of code that you have to put in your app that's going to communicate back to Apple when an in-app event that you want to track has happened. And then that goes back to Apple, and then they relate it to your campaigns. They report it onto the publisher, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is the way you were tracking the events before with your MMP and on your other campaigns and in Android and everything is it needs to change. You need to update the code in your app to take advantage of this conversion value method within the SK Ad Network framework. And so we really encourage people to start thinking about how to research this, understand how it works, and really start to think about how they want to take advantage of it. And I would say that, thinking about this in the context of the MMP as well, most MMPs have tried to work out ways to take advantage of this thing called a conversion value. And I would encourage you to start talking to your MMP and figuring out how are they going to do it so that they can take advantage of this kind of on your behalf. So that's kind of my final take on that there as well. Final recommendation is, in addition to talking to your media partners, also talk to your MMP, see how they're going to approach this conversion value method, think about how this is going to work for you, and then you need to start making some decisions in terms of how you instrument this in your app. That was a bit of a long-winded answer. I had kind of a couple points I'd add as well on just sort of some things to think more about kind of media partners and media strategy as well related to this. So there's really kind of three impacts that we're seeing here that I think people need to be aware of. First one is that retargeting is going to fundamentally change. And a lot of people say that it's even going to kind of go away in the form that it exists right now. So when I say retargeting, I mean, you're getting installs, you're kind of segmenting your users. You want to retarget different ones in different ways to kind of drive retention or engagement. And that was always possible on iOS by using this IDFA device ID, because that's how you would take the users you want to retarget and then send that to a Facebook or a Google so that you could run a campaign with them. That's going away. It's not going to be possible anymore. So retargeting, as you know, it is going to change. And I think that's something, back to what you said about sort of differences between iOS and Android, as long as Google doesn't make these same changes, you'll be able to retarget on Android, but you really won't in the way you used to on iOS. So you need to start thinking about your retargeting strategy. Second thing is things like real-time optimization are going to be less possible, because another aspect of this SK Ad Network framework is that the data, the install and the conversion data, does not get sent to Apple and then onto the publisher in real time. There are different ways, different types of time delays that they've implemented there. So any business model that relies heavily on real-time optimization needs to just kind of rethink how they're approaching this. Final thing I think everybody should really start thinking about is the idea of owned media. So, not necessarily relying on an ad network or a publisher to do all of your campaigns, but start thinking about the ways that you might be able to interact with your users. So if you've got an app, but you also have a website, hey, great, on that website, you could put a link to download the app, just as kind of one example there. But that's something that you own and you can track. Also thinking about ways you might put notifications into your app. This is something you can also control. And one thing that's important to clarify is that the SK Ad Network and ATT frameworks, they don't prevent you from tracking users and keeping the data yourself. You can still do that all the way you could before. It's only relating to sharing data with other companies that's being prohibited here. And so if you have really good, strong kind of owned media and ways to get messaging to your customers within your own system, within your website or your app, using push notification, email, whatever it might be, these are going to become very valuable channels for you to engage with your users and do retargeting in that way. So yeah, it's kind of a long-winded answer there, but these are kind of short-term considerations and then some of these kind of medium-term considerations that I think everybody needs to be thinking about right now.
Don't worry about the long answer, Ryan. This is super insightful, amazing. I'm sure everyone in the AppSource community is super happy to hear that. I do see a lot of challenges that you mentioned being super, super important, like changing the way retargeting is going to be done in the future. I mean, we're not aware of that yet, but still. And on top of that, I see that own media is getting stronger, that's for sure. And that probably it's not going to replace ad networks because we still have a lot of value there. But for sure, I see that advertisers should put some kind of focus there. So you mentioned what a lot of business are already should be doing. But you didn't mention like what our other advertisers are already doing. I mean, what are you seeing Kochava clients actually doing? You know, if there's a difference between what we suggest and what they actually do. And I'm curious to hear like about that process, if clients are actually doing the stuff that you mentioned, implementing a scaled network, implementing the conversion value, and doing things just beforehand so they don't be caught out of guard, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I will say is we do in fact have lots of our customers that are thinking about this, and we've been engaging with them to help them prepare. You know, bringing it back to that conversion value aspect of SK Ad Network. We've done a lot of work to tailor our system so that we can try to pack as much insight as possible into this framework. And so we're now working with our customers to implement one of the different kind of models and approaches that we've come up with. So we are at least seeing some traction on that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the enforcement of ATT has not actually started yet. Apple announced this back in the fall. They're now sort of speculating early spring is when they'll start enforcing it. So the things that we're talking about now, it's not yet the case that you absolutely must be following this. You've got 6 weeks, you know, maybe a couple months or so, we'll see, you know, so, you know, it's coming soon, but there is still time to kind of think about this and plan with it. So what we're seeing is a lot of customers that are testing different conversion models to try to, like I said, leverage this conversion value and just trying to see how that goes. We're also, we've also tailored our system to take advantage of some new things from Apple. One of them is this thing called App Clips. Which is kind of like instant apps on Google. It allows an app developer to kind of get a little snippet of their app in front of a user who doesn't have it, and then allow them to do something, make a purchase, you know, make a booking, whatever it might be. And so we can do attribution on this. And so we're encouraging our customers to also start exploring ideas with this. So these are some of the things that our customers are doing. But what I would say is kind of more generally, what I do see across the industry is a lot of people still haven't started testing this or taking advantage of it or implementing SK Ad Network yet. And so we do anticipate that, you know, in about, I mean, you know, kind of 2 months time or so, a lot of people are going to be caught off guard with this. And that a lot of people, there's sort of this prevailing idea that, oh, because of SK Ad Network, the MMP is going to go away. They're not going to be necessary anymore, because now an app developer, they can code all of this SK ad network into their app themselves. You don't need an MMP explicitly to take advantage of it. But I mean, people have been predicting the end of the MMP for many, many years now. Even back when I was at InMobi, people were saying that, and it's never happened. I don't think people realize just how much work it will take to implement SK ad network on your own. And when that enforcement happens, if you're not ready for it, you're gonna be faced with a period of time where you're figuring this out, and all your iOS campaigns are gonna be on pause. So we do encourage people, if you want to go it alone, fine, but there's a lot of value in an MMP. They take a lot of the heavy lifting off of it. But regardless, start thinking about this now, start implementing it, start testing different ideas, so that whenever that ATT enforcement happens, you're gonna be ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's the right choice to go to an MMP. That's what we always recommending to our clients. Like, go with them. They are doing the heavy lifting for you. They are putting a lot of effort in this, and it's just simpler for both parties. If not, all the heavy lifting and the development will go on your side.
Yeah, so, in fact, if I mention something else on that too as well, is that if you do go it alone with SK Ad Network, anytime you want to make a change, somebody in your marketing department says, oh, we're tracking this wrong, we got to make this particular change, you have to update your app. Or, hey, we want to test this new idea, you have to update your app. And with an MMP, you're going to be able to control a lot of these things server side. I mean, I can't speak for every MMP, but certainly at us, we have multiple different ways to use the conversion value. Once you tag in your events correctly, you can then go and kind of change how that gets sent to Apple. So there's a lot of flexibility server side that you will have with an MMP if you go that route. And so, yeah, I mean, to your point, I would. This is not just a shameless plug for Kochava. I think you are, your customers are doing a really good service for themselves to go with an MMP. It's going to give them a lot of flexibility in this uncertain time.
Yeah, for sure. I think flexibility and going like server side without the need of actually having to update the app every time there's a change on the implementation of SK Ad Network or conversion values or whatever. It's a really strong point when considering an MMP in order to reduce the complexity. So yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, Ryan, we need to move on to our next topic. So, IDFAs have been around since the beginning of the industry, and we had used them in order to reduce ad fraud before with deterministic attribution. Right now, without IDFAs in the ground, I am curious to hear about new ways fraudsters might find ways in order to do some kind of fraud. I don't know if click hijacking is something that can be done more easily or not without IDFAs. And I'm curious to hear your opinions on this. If there's any way that Kochava can help them in order to stay on top of ad fraud in this new challenge, this new perspective.
Yeah, what I would say is this one's a bit tricky to kind of predict. I'm more confident to say that retargeting is going to change and some of these other things. Fraud, I can see some aspects of it kind of going either way. One reason that I think fraud could become more problematic, is that historically, pre-iOS 14, if you were trying to do attribution on a campaign and you didn't have the IDFA as a way to attribute an install to a campaign, you would usually default to some type of probabilistic attribution. And so you can think, oh, with fewer IDFAs, there's going to be more probabilistic attribution, and probabilistic attribution is like just a breeding ground for fraud, because you get things like click flooding that try to take advantage of the probabilistic nature in order to over attribute or misattribute installs that might have been organic to some fraudulent made up click. And that's quite a common occurrence. And so you'd think, oh, with more probabilistic attribution, things like that would increase. Now, on the flip side of that, Apple has actually said that for users who do not opt into ATT and don't give their permission, they're actually not going to allow probabilistic attribution. This is one of the things that's kind of to be determined exactly how Apple is going to enforce this. But we're starting to think actually, and hearing some signals from Apple over the last kind of month, that probabilistic attribution is also going to be limited. So that would be a reason to think that ad fraud might go down, just because with iOS 14, there's going to be a general decrease in attribution outside of the SK ad network framework. And so, you know, if probabilistic largely goes away or becomes reduced, you might see less ad fraud. So kind of hard to say how it's going to go, but these are kind of two drivers that could point at one direction or another. Now, there's a third thing that we're thinking about as well that is a bit sort of speculative, but it'd be interesting, certainly something to keep an eye on, is that keep in mind that ATT doesn't mean that IDFA goes away entirely. It just means that users have to give permission. And so there will be some percentage of users who do give permission for their data to be tracked and shared. And in that case, IDFA is still going to be present. Now, we think that those users are going to be extremely valuable from an advertising perspective, because they basically said, yeah, track away, do whatever you want, target me, retarget me, et cetera. And so for that segment of users, advertisers and publishers will want to monetize as much as possible. Advertisers will be willing to pay a lot for it because the old dynamics are still going to be there. So what we think could happen, I'm not saying it will, but it's something to keep an eye on, is that would create a huge incentive for fraudsters to create fake IDFAs, fake traffic that appears to be a user who has opted into ATT. So we think that's something to kind of keep an eye on, is kind of the potential prevalence of fake IDFAs, because it's going to be such a valuable segment in the ecosystem.
Well, super good answer. Thank you very much for sharing all of this. I think that, as you mentioned, it's super hard to predict this, but fraud always finds a way. I think we just need to keep an eye on and stay informed about the industry. So that's like kind of what I imagine moving forward, you know, like MMPs and anti-fraud tools being able to track this on a daily basis as time goes on, and coming up with new ways of preventing fraud as they have been working until this moment, you know, like until today, they were able to come up, fraudsters were able to come with new ways of fraud. MMPs and anti-fraud tools were able to detect them and reduce it over time. So I think this will hopefully not affect that much. But yeah, Ryan, super insightful insight as always. This has been an amazing conversation. I am curious if you could share about what are the sources you use in order to stay informed and on top of the mobile marketing news. So if you could share.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple online like websites that I'll check out frequently. Like there's campaignlive.co.uk. They usually have some really insightful stuff. Adweek.com also has lots of good stuff. They've got good journalism. You know, it's a good way to sort of stay on touch with things, on top of things. But to be honest, I'd say largely my two main sources of information are, one, talking to customers and hearing what sort of things they're experiencing, what are their concerns. And, you know, because I do sales, I get to do plenty of that. I'd also say LinkedIn is a great source as well. You know, we all have networks on LinkedIn with like-minded people in the industry, and I usually catch a lot of breaking news there, or sort of interesting posts and insights from people in my network. But the other one, and this goes back to why I think you should be talking to your MMP and your ad tech vendors, is, you know, thankfully I don't have to go and figure out all this stuff on my own. We've got an incredible product team that are constantly reviewing API specs and documentation and privacy rights and all these things, and then telling me what's going on, giving me the brief on it. And so I have that benefit of having a whole team of people behind me that are able to distill this information, give me the relevant points, and kind of make sure that I understand it. And so, obviously that's as someone working for Kochava, that's available for me. But actually, anybody out there that wants to, kind of have these conversations, you'll usually find that vendors are quite willing to do it because it's on everybody's mind and it's impacting their business. So I would also encourage people, again, look at your vendors when you're having these conversations. Just ask them, ask them questions, because they're usually going to have some insight or some opinions on it.
Yeah, Ryan, that's super valuable. I think the best way to stay on top of what's going on in the market is by actually talking to people, talking to clients. That's something that we always put focus on, and we encourage clients to talk to their partners and their vendors. In this case, I think both Kochava and Rocket Lab are super capable of having these kind of deep down conversations and give a lot of value to clients. So yeah, on top of that, I want to mention, I think that the websites or the blogs that you shared are super valuable. In fact, I've been taking some deep looks to Kochava's website, and I really find some interesting material. Of course, the app clips article was really fine, the one you mentioned. We're going to share it as a comment in this video. But yeah, that's something that was amazing. But yeah, Ryan, in the sake of finishing this on time, I will need to say you goodbye. Thank you very much for sharing. This was absolutely amazing. We are thrilled to have you here, and I hope we can see you the next time. I mean, I see a lot of opportunity for us to keep providing value to the community together like this. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matias. This has been a great chat, and yeah, looking forward to the next steps.